Okay, so I'm going to call this one Building the Choral Map. And what I mean by that is that I'm trying to suggest that for the first time perhaps in history, we can actually take not only integrative theory, but visionary theory in such a way that there is no real moving parts. That's the goal of this. I'm not saying it's there yet, but a properly visionary map is one that there really isn't any division within the parts very much at all, and so that you can hold the whole conceptual schema essentially of the evolutionary history as one, and then the degree to which you look at it, it all becomes a fractal, and you can see it more and more fractally, like you're looking at sort of a mandala, in that sense that you scan in and you see more and more patterns within it as you go. So that is what my opinion of the choral map would look like. So what I'm doing primarily here is taking what Ken Wilber's thoughts are, as I do think they're sound, and I'm adding a few new twists and turns on it to make it more comprehensive, I believe. There's a few snags still that I don't feel have been fully worked out, but I believe that on the whole, given how well some of these things do work, that it's a move towards that vision in that sense. So a lot of this is Wilberian thinking, but it's twisted in a certain way with a lot of spiral dynamics talk. One thing that I've changed dramatically in a certain way is talk about tiers, and I'm going to suggest that instead of 2 tiers, in a certain way, we should maybe talk about 4 tiers, because I think it explains development better. Also, another important concept is focus, and that is the intentive focus within the different quadrants. Quadrants are the main perspectives that we take moment to moment. And also another idea that I'm going to primarily be focusing on here is the bodies. The wisdom traditions talk about this. So here are the process of what I'm considering the fractal development. And there might be 2 other different sort of quadrants in a certain way that ought to be mapped onto here, but yet we don't have that system developed in a very holistic way at this point. So this is sort of the best map that I can dream up of. Now, other than I've been working with some geometry that is suggestive perhaps of how that might fit together in a better manner. So I'm suggesting it kind of looks like this, at least from one perspective. It's moving kind of in this direction, and it cycles and it goes bigger and bigger, and that's kind of this idea of a spiral, but the spiral has this sort of infinite loop to it that grows out and out. And it's holarchical. It's not hierarchical in the sense that it goes like this, rather it transcends and includes that which went before and cycles back on itself consistently. And so it's always has its foot in the past in a certain way. And this gets us out of linearity into more of a non-linear thinking modality. So with this, I'm suggesting that there's this kind of I space. And the I space is what sometimes is considered phenomenological, but I would actually just say it's feeling of the body. Kind of in a certain way, it's just being aware of the body moment to moment so that you can survive in the environment. So there's a spectrum of that, and it would go roughly, I believe, from the first celled organisms to approximately fish or perhaps reptiles. I'm starting to think reptiles might perhaps better be placed down here with another sort of focus within the eye. I can explain that a little bit, and I shall. But the primary focus in the first tier, what I'm considering the first tier, is actually survival focus. So this differs from spiral dynamics, where spiral dynamics has 6 layers. I'm actually suggesting that the first tier is maybe better expressed up into about the fish. Where the second tier is more of a focus on emotion. And this we see, as I suggested, perhaps starting with reptiles. Why I say that is that with reptiles, we see the first sexual organs appear. And this allows for a new kind of we to begin happening, but kind of for the eye. It's made it this organ kind of for the feeling of the personal eye experience. Later, it will be imbued more into a we space with the mammals proper, where there seems to be an emotive care for other mammals, and this lasts a long ways up into, you know, the higher apes, where they care not only of their immediate family, but also, you know, a number of kinship people, you know, mammals within that tribe, sort of thing. So I'm calling that the second tier, and the focus seems to be roughly on emotive things. And the survival focus, you know, maybe up into the reptilian brainstem. Maybe reptilian brainstem's better placed somewhere just in between here. It's a little hard to say. Something like that, though. The building of the reptilian brainstem, perhaps, is up into the eye. And then when we get into third tier, or what I'm calling the third tier, I'm actually suggesting that this is the broad spectrum of spiral dynamics proper. So really all of spiral dynamics fits within this what I'm calling the third tier. And this is more of a reflective focus. Although orange is like reflective proper, these beings, that is on this planet, maybe only dolphins, perhaps, you know, things, animals like elephants and humans, a few higher apes maybe, are somewhere in the third tier with the ability to reflect. And so there's a transcending including process, of course, so we still have to we still have some importance on survival, some importance on emotions, but the primary focus seems to be on reflection here. And so, as I noted, you know, beige would actually be, within this reflective focus, a focus on I. So within the broad spectrum of it has a subfractal of I. And purple is, within the reflective focus, a sub focus of we, or emotion. And so, you know, you see sort of perhaps the magician, you know, the magic thinking kind of taking place there. And then when you get into, this part I'm a little bit confused about, because these are collapsed, essentially, so that they're, you know, the broad spectrum of survival has been collapsed into what now is considered beige, and then the broad spectrum of purple has been collapsed, so that although they were separate tiers, they're being passed through again, but more quickly. So I'm kind of saying that once those have been transcended, then maybe we go back. So they've collapsed, and then we actually start again from this space at the eye, so that the how can I put this? Essentially, red seems to have some level of connectivity either to the I again, or perhaps something like the it. It's a little bit hard for me to tell, but I think it might actually be more in the I space, because these two have been collapsed now with beige and purple. So if we do that, then you get red with an I focus, which is power driven, so it's kind of for the self, for the I. And then you get blue, which seems to be building these kind of religious structures for the we, for kind of a hermeneutical belief in some sort of absolutistic structure that we share, or those that are inside the circle. And then you get this it focus of rationality and reflexivity and skepticism. And then you get sort of green that wants to connect and make systems theory and chaos theory, which fits very well in there. But it's within the reflective focus, within this objective reflective focus. So often Wilber calls that flatland sort of integral. It's not properly integral, and the integral only comes online with the second tier. So we see yellow, for example, flip back on the eye in a certain way, but again, it's the broad collapse of that. As I said here, we've had beings that have went through the survival focus, so you're just reintegrating that from a new higher level, and then you have yellow, or turquoise, that sort of has a reflection of this subtle experience, and there's kind of parallels here between religiosity and that sort of thing. And then you have coral, which seems to be making more of a technological modality, and again, that's a collapse almost exclusively of the whole objective realm, that humans have been going through. And then it would be a new system that's developing, and or we flip back here for what might be considered indigo. And so again, there would be a survivalist focus. It's only a few beings that might know who that is, what that experience is like, and maybe they'll give me some feedback on that if they think it does indeed fit well with that I focus. There's also this idea of bodies, and this is something that the wisdom traditions suggest that there are. And there's this idea of a gross body, a subtle body, a causal body, and a non-dual body. Now this, I think, can integrate within this whole process that this transcends and includes. You cannot have a causal body without something like a neocortex. It doesn't have to be a neocortex, but it has to be an organ system that allows for reflexivity. And then you cannot have an emotive body or a subtle body without this emotive focus, without something like a limbic system. It doesn't have to be a limbic system, but it has to allow for emotive capacities to take place within the organism. And then you can't have a gross body, that is to say, a physicalist body that interacts, without some sort of vital energy that allows it to be active and not passive in reality. And then so there's this non-dual body that seems to have something paralleling the subtle body. The upper quadrants here are primarily independent, individualistic, autonomous, and or eros focus, that is like drive upward. The lower quadrants have more of a focus on emotionality, connectivity, relationships, togetherness, heart, this sort of thing, agape, the broad spectrum of agape, so that that we move through back and forth what might be considered an I, a we, an I, a we, an I, a we, an I, a we. More correctly, it's an I, we, it, and its, but they have that same feeling of autonomous agape, autonomous agape, autonomous agape. And then also there's this other parallel thing happening where the left hand tends to be more subjective or interiorist, and the right hand tends to be more objectivist. So that means a focus on what's happening out there with those quadrants, and a focus more on what's happening in here with these quadrants. And so that is some of the very basic groundwork. I have much more to say about it in many different areas, but it's how this mandala seems to work in a more comprehensive light, I believe. So I shall leave it there. Be well.